chapter 10, section 3. So in this section, we're going to be talking about the other city-state that we'll be mentioning, and that is the city-state of Athens. So Athens is located northeast of Sparta. They're going to have a very different lifestyle than Sparta. So Athens in the beginning was ruled by kings. But in the year 750 BC, the kings are going to be overthrown and an oligarchy is going to be set up. An oligarchy is a form of government in which a few people have the ruling power. So it's not just one person, but it's not necessarily everybody. It's a few people. You're going to have fights between the rulers and farmers, though, concerning ownership of land. You know, the rulers wanted to say they owned it, and the farmers said they owned it because they're the ones that worked it. You know, the upper class wants to fix the problem. And they agree to start making some reforms to the government. Graco made the first reform attempt, but it isn't going to work. It's going to fail because of the harsh punishments that were attached to his changes. I mean, for example, under his rules, stealing an apple could result in death. Even today, sometimes you'll hear some laws being referred to as draconian. And that has to do with the harsh punishments that could be attached to some laws. In 594 BC, Solon is going to introduce a constitution. You know, a constitution is a set of principles, and it's the rules for governing. You know, here in the United States, we have the U.S. Constitution, and it's our rules for our government. His constitution is going to break the political power of the rich. You know, it puts a limit on how much land an individual could own. If you did own land, you got voting rights in the assembly. It was the assembly that had the power to pass laws. And it's going to share it with a lot of people because one person can only own so much land, giving more opportunity for people to own land. And so then they can have voting rights in the assembly. Solon, he erased debts of people. He freed people forced to be slaves because of debts. You know, he offered, under his constitution, citizenship was going to be offered to people that weren't from Athens. And he had every father was under order to teach his son a trade. Life improves in some areas under Solon. You know, you've got more people taking part in government. You've got trade increasing. But you had some people that still weren't happy with his changes. You know, if you were rich, you felt like he changed too much. If you were poor, you felt like there needed to be more changes. So in the end, Solon left off not real popular. Pisistratus is going to take over in 560 BC. And he is going to be very much supported by the lower class. He divides up some of the large estates and he gives land to people who had no land. And he said to be a citizen, you don't have to own land. He encouraged the arts. When he dies, his sons take over. And it's at this time that Sparta actually overthrows Athens. In 508 BC, Spartans are going to be overthrown by Cleisthenes. And the reforms that Cleisthenes is going to make in Athens are going to last until the fall of Greece. He's going to introduce a democratic constitution, which favored the equality of all people. For example, everyone had the freedom of speech. The assembly is going to be open to all men over 20 years old. And each year, 10 generals are going to be elected, and they'll run the military. They'll serve as chief magistrates or judges. One of the 10 will be named commander-in-chief. You're going to have a council of 500 that is going to handle the everyday business in Athens. And the members of the Council of 500 are going to be chosen by lot, meaning you're going to have a whole bunch of names in there, numbers or whatever, and they'll be pulled from a large pot. The advantages to drawing by lot over election is it gave everyone a chance for a term, not just the rich. Every citizen was believed to be smart enough to serve. The only exception was in war. In war, they needed a general on the Council of 500. And the general would rule or be allowed to serve, I guess, but they could only serve, people could only be serving for 2 terms. Anybody, you get 2 terms. That way, everybody had a chance to serve on the Council of 500. Citizens in Athens were required to educate their sons. There were no public schools, so you had to hire a tutor or attend a private school. This started off around the age of 7 years old. So at 7 years old, you begin studying writing and math and music. You practiced sports. You memorized poets like Homer. 18-year-old males would become citizens. And they would go to the temple of Zeus. And at the temple of Zeus, they would take an oath of citizenship, where they promised to make Athens a better place to live. They promised to be honorable in battle. They promised to follow the Constitution. They promised to respect their religion. Let's take a quick look here. A day in the life of an ancient Athenian.
It's 427 BCE, and the worst internal conflict ever to occur in the ancient Greek world is in its 4th year. The Peloponnesian War is being fought between the city-states of Athens and Sparta, as well as their allies. The Athenians can't match the formidable Spartan army on land, so they've abandoned the countryside and moved inside the walls surrounding their city and port, now provisioned by a superior fleet and extensive maritime empire. The cramped conditions have taken a toll, and a recent plague wiped out a third of the population, but city life goes on. Archias and Dexaleia live in the center of Athens. As a painter of high-class pottery, Archias is relatively well off and takes great interest in the city's affairs. Dexaleia, on the other hand, can't participate in politics or own property. The couple are grateful to the gods that 3 of their 4 children, a son and 2 daughters, have survived past infancy. Many parents see daughters as a liability, since they require dowries to find husbands. But Archias is confident that his wealth will allow him to make good matches for them without going bankrupt. Like many Athenians, the family owns slaves. Originally from Thrace, they were captured in war. Thrata does most of the housework and helps raise the children. Philon is a pedagogos, who supervises the son's education, teaching him reading and writing. Archias is up early because there's a meeting of the Ecclesia, the assembly of citizens, taking place at dawn. Before setting out, he burns incense and pours a libation at the small shrine in the courtyard on behalf of his entire household. Dexilea will remain at home all day, teaching her daughters domestic skills. Later, she'll retire to the inner courtyard for some fresh air. When Archias arrives at the Agora, the civic and commercial heart of the city, he finds the square swarming with his fellow citizens, native-born adult males who have completed military training. Attached to the central monument is a notice board with the meeting's agenda. Today, there's only one item of discussion: what to do with the people of Mytilene, a city on the island of Lesbos where a revolt against Athenian rule has just been put down. The meeting takes place on a hill west of the Acropolis, known as the Pnyx. The word means tightly packed, and the crowd of 5,000 citizens makes it clear why. The heralds purify the hill by sprinkling its boundary with pig's blood and call for order. As everyone sits on benches facing the platform, the presiding officer opens the meeting with the words, "Tis agoreven boulete," who wishes to address the assembly. One by one, citizens speak, some advising mercy, others bent on vengeance. A motion is proposed to execute all the Mytileneans and enslave their women and children because they betrayed their Athenian allies during a time of war. A majority raises their right hands in favor. Once the meeting's over, Archias heads back to the Agora to buy food and wine. Hundreds have gathered there to discuss the results, many unhappy with the decision. When Archias returns home, he tells Dexilea about the debate. She thinks that killing the innocent as well as the guilty is harsh and counterproductive, and tells him as much. Around dusk, Archias goes to a friend's house for a symposium. The 9 men drink wine and discuss the meeting well into the night. Archias shares his wife's opinion, urging mercy, and his friends eventually agree. Before dawn, something unprecedented happens. Heralds circulate throughout Athens, announcing the council has called another meeting. The second debate is equally heated, but a new resolution, to execute only the leaders of the revolt, narrowly passes. Yet there's a problem. A ship with orders to carry out the first resolution was dispatched the previous day. And so another ship quickly set sail to countermand the order, a race of democracy against time. Did you enjoy this glimpse of daily life in an ancient civilization? If so, check out our Day in the Life playlist.
All right, so we need to talk now about the Persian Wars. The Persians are going to rule the largest and most powerful empire in the Western world. At 545 BC, the Persians are going to conquer Ionia. Ionia, as you can see there, is just across the sea from Greece. The Greek city-states in Asia Minor and the Aegean Islands get conquered by Persia. So all you have left is mainland Greece, as the Asia Minor parts of the Greek city-states and the Aegean Islands are taken over by Persia. 20 years later, the Ionians are going to revolt. And they ask the Greek mainland for help. So they ask the Greek mainland for help, but all Greece could really do is send a few warships. They're going to fight for 5 years, but the Persians put down the revolt. Darius was the Persian king, and he's not very happy. He wants to punish mainland Greece for helping out the other Greeks in Ionia. So, in 490 BC, Darius is going to send 600 ships plus the army towards Greece. The Persians are going to land at Marathon. Marathon is around 26 miles away from Athens. The Persians then decide to sail directly to Athens and attack by sea. While loading the ships, the Athenians are going to run from the hills and attack the Persians. And the Persians are going to be defeated at the Battle of Marathon. A runner is going to leave Marathon and run all the way to Athens, some 26 miles, with the good news that the Persians have been defeated at Marathon. He gets to Athens and he's going to cry out, Nike, which is the victory goddess, and then he dies from exhaustion, which today people run a marathon. A marathon's 26 miles. The distance from Marathon to Athens that he ran to cry out, Nike or Nike, which is that victory goddess. The Athenians are going to soon find silver near Athens. And news is going to spread on their triremes, these warships with 3 levels of rowers. It's like 174 rowers in total. Athens wants to be prepared, though, in case the Persians attack again. And so they're going to start to build up their navy. And they're going to end up building the largest navy in Greece. And Persia is going to return. In 480 BC, Xerxes, which that would be Darius's son, is going to attack. 250,000 soldiers are going to end up conquering northern Greece. You've got 20 city-states in the rest of Greece that decide to unite. So you've got Sparta leading the army, you got Athens leading the navy, and they're going to work together. And around 7,000 soldiers are going to go to Thermopylae, which is 100 miles from Athens. And they're going to hold off the Persians for 3 days. They're going to hold off the Persians for 3 days. The people of Athens are going to be given time then, in that 3 days, to escape to the islands of Salamis. The Persians are going to figure out how to get around the Greek army. And they go on to kill every Greek soldier they find. When they get to Athens, they discover that Athens has pretty much been deserted. Because remember, the Athenians escaped to the island of Salamis. Persians burn Athens. The Greeks are going to trick the Persians to sail between Athens and Salamis. The pass was very narrow pass. And it's easy then for the Athenians, for the Greeks, to attack the Persians one by one, because the large Persian ships had to navigate this narrow pass. And so they can only really go through there one by one. The Greeks have these small, fast ships. The Greeks are going to defeat the Persian ships. Xerxes is going to be forced to return back to Asia, but he does leave behind a small force. In 479 BC, the Greeks finally finish off the leftover Persian troops at the Battle of Plataea. The Greeks then destroy the remaining Persian navy. The Persian Wars are over.
Welcome back to another quick revision video from History Skills. This is the Greco-Persian Wars in 2 minutes. Ancient Greece was made up of a series of city-states in the area of modern Greece and western Turkey, which was known as Ionia. In the late 6th century BC, the Persian Empire conquered the Ionian city-states. In 500 BC, these Greek cities rose up in rebellion against Persia, which was called the Ionian Revolt. Athens, one of the cities in Greece, sent ships to support the rebels. However, after years of fighting, Persia eventually defeated them. The Persian king, Darius I, wanted to punish Athens for its involvement in the revolt, and, in 490 BC, a Persian army of 25,000 men landed at Marathon, near Athens. Athens sent out 10,000 soldiers and won a surprise victory at the Battle of Marathon, and the Persians fled from Greece. 10 years later, the next Persian king, Xerxes, attempted another invasion. The Persian army was so vast, it had to march overland through northern Greece. The remaining Greek city-states formed a military alliance against Xerxes, the most famous of which were Athens and Sparta. In 480 BC, 300 Spartan soldiers, along with thousands of Greek allies, clashed with the Persians at the Battle of Thermopylae. After 3 days of fighting, the Greeks were wiped out, but this bought time for the people of Athens to be evacuated by ship to the nearby island of Salamis. The Persian army burnt Athens to the ground, and then Xerxes sent his ships to destroy the surviving Athenians and their navy. However, the Greeks won another surprise victory at the Battle of Salamis, and the Persians retreated into central Greece. In 479 BC, a combined Greek army finally defeated the remaining Persian force at the Battle of Plataea, which ended the Greco-Persian Wars.
So the Persians were defeated in Greece, but they were still in Ionia, over there in Asia Minor. This made the Greeks very nervous, because at any time the Persians could just cross the sea again and come and attack them. So the Athenians suggest that maybe they should form a defensive league, a protective group. And it's going to end up being called the Delian League, since it's going to be on the island of Delos. Sparta does not join. The only way to leave the league was to get permission from others in the league to leave. The league shared one navy. Athens built and ran the ships, and the other city-states helped pay for these ships. The Delian League works out for a while, works out well. But eventually, Athens is going to get more and more power. Other city-states are going to have to ask Athens to sail or trade. Criminals would be brought to Athens for trial. Everyone used Athenian coins. Athenian soldiers would even interfere in the politics of other city-states. eventually this Delian League turns into the Athenian Empire. The main leader of Athens was going to be Pericles. And he dreamed of Athens as being the most beautiful and perfect city. And he's going to spend his time rebuilding all of the palaces and the temples on the Acropolis. Just to rebuild the Parthenon. The Parthenon would be Athena's temple. It took 11 years. And this was the goddess of Athens, Athena. It took 11 years to rebuild this one. And they used money. He used money that belonged to the Delian League. He's also going to build something called the Long Walls. They were these two parallel fortified walls with a tile roof. It connected the city of Athens to the seaport of Piraeus 5 miles away. Meaning, if there was a war, Athens could still have access to their port and get supplies. Pericles is going to lead Athens for 30 years. And under Pericles, Athens is going to excel in art, in philosophy, in literature. People from other city-states moved to Athens to settle there. Other city-states began to resent the power of Athens. Athens is going to attack one of Sparta's allies. And a group of city-states led by Sparta is going to declare war on Athens because of this. It's going to be called the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War is going to last for 30 years. It will finally end in 404 BC, and Athens surrenders to Sparta. But it wasn't just going to be the war that hurt Athens. During the war, a plague is actually going to strike Athens. And Athens is going to lose a quarter of its population, and much of its land is going to be ruined. And a lot of the Athenian men are going to escape and become mercenaries for Persia. Mercenaries are hired soldiers. They don't really have any loyalty to a place. It's whoever pays them. When the Peloponnesian War ended and Sparta wins, it was 404 BC, and Sparta is going to set up an oligarchy in Athens. And 30 Athenian aristocrats are going to be chosen to rule Athens. Eventually, Athens is going to be able to successfully revolt against the Spartans, and they set up a democracy again. But Athens is never going to be as powerful as they once were after this loss.